school board down there.
Oh,
Wow.
Yeah.
Good morning, Lori.
Good morning.
morning.
I was waiting for you to unfog so you could see me.
Yeah. Susan, yeah. Yeah.
It's like we're at the movie theater.
There, you got it.
Magic man.
Right on. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Well, got a few more years with this system tied before we.
Yeah.
Then Ryan, we're ready to go whenever you are.
Okay, sounds good.
You'll give me the high sign? We're good?
Yep, you can go.
Oh, okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming in. This is the Owatonna School Board. It's Thursday, the 25th of February, 7:15. For a special meeting, I'll call the meeting to order, and Eric has our attendance.
All 7 reps and the student representative are
That's
present.
terrific. Thank you.
Champ.
Let's all start with the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First up would be to approve the agenda for our meeting this morning. We'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor with an aye? Any opposed? That motion carries. I'm going to turn things over to Mr. Elstead for the learning plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board this morning, and thank you for making this special meeting work. We have looked at, we've been through several different learning models throughout this school year as the conditions around the coronavirus have changed and made it so. As Governor Walz indicated last Wednesday, he's once again turning back the dials, to use the verbiage that he uses, looking at the conditions that are currently in our state and maybe even more locally in Steele County. I'll show you a little bit of data here as to why we want to make or recommend this change for you to consider. In Steele County, and this was as of last Thursday, the new data will be coming out actually today at 11 o'clock. The number was at 29.17. We anticipate that this week will probably be in the very low 20s. And again, it's a 14-day count. You take that 14-day count and then you divide that by 3.65, which is the factor, because we have 36,500 residents in Owatonna, or Steele County, excuse me, which will give us that number. It is even our belief that as we now have started tracking this county number, that in 2 weeks' time we could be closer to 15 per 10,000. So the numbers are dropping in Steele County. Furthermore, we track our district data. We have our own, and you've seen some of that before, our COVID tracker with the district. And what we look at are those that are close contacts, and furthermore, those that were infectious while in school. Over the last 14 days, we've had one person that was infectious while at school. What we're also learning, though, is that student-to-student transmission is almost negligible in our district. In fact, I think we're at 0.0365 for student-to-student transmission while at school. Now, there may have been some cases for student-to-student transmission in other settings outside of school, but certainly not in our classrooms thus far. The other piece of data, obviously, that has certainly come in our windshield right now is vaccinations. Governor Walz very graciously put educators and child care providers in the priority list. We have been working through that right now. As of next week, our staff, including bus drivers, coaches, substitutes, everyone that works with our children, will have at least their first dose. And then again, as this slide indicates, as of March 30th, 95% of our staff will have accepted a vaccine will have their second and final dose. This is a critical factor, and I want to just pause here for just a moment. One of our biggest issues with trying to look at bringing more and more of our students back in person has been staff availability. In the event that we had a student that was infectious while at school and the teacher may in fact have been a close contact, the quarantine rules right now do not allow us to bring back that teacher until the 8th day, so 7 days of quarantine, and that is with a negative test. If you think about that across our district and the number of classroom opportunities there would be, in very quick order, we could see 20 to 25 of our staff or more have to go into quarantine, and we lose their ability to really teach. So within that, the other factor is that I've mentioned to you a couple of times, we have a very, very limited group of substitute teachers. That group has sort of dropped down because, again, we have some of our retired educators and others that have helped us out in the past that are simply stepping aside this year because of the fear of coronavirus. So anyway, that's a critical factor in getting staff vaccinated, because I'll go back to this premise that the CDC has recommended that once staff have received their second dose, there is a waiting period just beyond that. I think it's 14 days beyond that. We actually do not have to quarantine at that point. And that was the latest recommendation from the CDC. So staff availability is a big part of the decision for this move. We sent out a family survey last week. I would share with you that the number of responses is the greatest response we've ever received in any survey we've sent out to our families. This closed at 3 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, and the latest numbers indicate that 82.3% of our parents indicated that they wanted their secondary students to return in person 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, at 100% capacity. And then again, the converse of that would be 17.7% indicated that they still felt comfortable with returning in a current hybrid model. Understanding this and seeing the response from our parents, it's imperative and that we see this and understand that we're serving our families by at least recommending this shift to you. I also want to just point out that this survey was not sent to our families that are currently doing distance learning and have made that choice, because when they made that choice for second semester, we told them that that was going to be their choice for the remainder of the year, because it has really severe staffing implications for us if we're moving that number back and forth all the time. There was some additional guidance that came out last week with the governor's announcement from the Department of Education and the Department of Health. First and foremost was social distancing. Up until now, we have had to maintain 6 feet of social distance between our students. That number has now shifted to 3 feet. What I will share with you is that within our guidance for parents and for our community, we are going to do our level best to get to 3 feet. There are some classrooms in our district where it will be a real struggle to do that. But we are going to make sure that we are doing our level best. And so over the course of the next couple of weeks, as you see our timeline, we are going to start going into classrooms and making sure that we're moving the right furniture around to get as many students as safely as we can into our classrooms. The next part indicates, and this is another change around county level data. As I explained to you back in December when we made the shift for our elementary students to bring them back in person, the county level data for that kind of went away, and that still isn't a factor for our elementary attendance. However, for the secondary, middle school, high school, and ALC, it makes a difference. If the cases in Steele County, and I mentioned that very early on, the cases are continuing to drop, if we were to get somewhere between 0 to 10 cases in that 14-day count, we no longer then have to monitor social distancing, nor do we have to do contact tracing investigations. So again, this is my plea for our community, for those that are watching and listening. We need to continue doing the mitigation strategies that have been suggested for over a year now, which is mask up, wash your hands, keep as much distance as you can, because the county number makes a real difference for us. The other part that I want to add, and this is, I'll trigger into the next slide, around a 4-day week. we are still obligated under Executive Order 20-82 to offer a full distance learning opportunity for those families that choose that. Currently, in our middle school, high school, and ALC setting, we still have about 500 students that are partaking in a distance learning opportunity. So it's a big number. And we want to make sure that we're following that executive order. Did I skip a slide here maybe? No, I did not. What you'll see then is, whoops, should pause that, doggone it. There we are. The recommendation that I'm making for you this morning, I do have a couple of other little pieces of data for you, is that all of our 612 students return to a 4-day schedule of in-person instruction starting on Tuesday, March 30th. And we will continue to offer that distance learning option to families that have chosen that option, again, as per the executive order. Why a 4-day week? Again, in order for us to meet that executive order, it's important that our teaching staff at the middle school and high school and ALC have a unique opportunity every Wednesday to connect with our distance learners. When you think about staffing different models, as I mentioned to you at our last board meeting, we're in the process of applying and hopefully will be accepted to offer a fully online academy. If you have an opportunity to get that from that privilege from the Department of Education, you can staff programs very differently, because what we would look at then is we would assign staff just to distance learning, and that would be their role, is to be those facilitators of different content areas. Because this year we've really been asked to do 3 different models, we didn't have the staffing to do all 3 models and have separate people doing separate work as that. We were allowed at the elementary to do that because our kids don't travel at the elementary, so they have one classroom teacher and they do the reading and math and all of those subject areas. But as you know, at the secondary they travel and they go to different content area experts to each period to get that learning. So within that, we're limited in our staffing, so we still have to allow the staff to connect on Wednesdays. And that's an important factor because, as I mentioned, we're still serving 500 students in that way. And so we want to make sure that the 4-day week stays intact for the remainder of this school year. The conditions of return. Face masks and face coverings will absolutely be required. And there is no negotiation with this. We believe that face masks, as has been scientifically proven over and over again, are and is the largest factor in keeping our folks safe, keeping our students, staff, and other community members safe. Within that, we'll ask that we have them on in all of our buildings unless otherwise directed. Why otherwise directed? The guidance could change. And that could change tomorrow, it could change next month, it might not change until next December, we don't know. But we want to make sure that there's some flexibility there. I know that there have been some that maybe look at face coverings and maybe don't have the same beliefs around face coverings that the CDC or other Department of Health agencies have suggested. What we're saying to families is that this is required and it's non-negotiable. If a family has a belief that they do no longer want to wear masks, distance learning will have to be their option, because that's the only way that we can try to keep all of our students safe in bringing them back. Social distancing, taken from the guidance again, will be at least 3 feet when feasible. Disinfection and sanitizing will happen after every class period. That's not changing. We've been doing that all along and will continue to do so. And then we will be quarantining for any close contacts. Although the social distancing number changed to 3 feet, close contact will still be in effect for 6 feet. So what we're doing in our classrooms is we're looking at how do we tier desks in classrooms or tables in classrooms so that we can still limit the number of close contacts if we happen to have a student that's infectious while at school. So again, these will be the conditions of return on that March 30th day. This is one other piece, then I'm going to go back to the recommendation, add a few other details. How will we handle future outbreaks? Well, up until now, we've really been monitoring county data, and as you saw back in November, we used the county data to move to distance learning because we were experiencing an outbreak in our community. That has changed, and so now what's being recommended by the Department of Health is that we're utilizing what we call our ILI indicator, which is the influenza or now COVID-like illness symptoms. So in a particular building, and I'll pick on Owatonna Middle School, if we had 5% of students and staff that were experiencing those influenza or COVID-like illness symptoms, it then triggers a consultation with Steele County Public Health to determine how large the transmission and spread is in the building. Why don't we automatically close at 5%? Because there are some reasons that we may not have to. Like, if there happen to be 3 or 4 families that might have a couple of students each in their family that are attending, that's not considered large spread. That's considered familial spread and doesn't necessarily have as negative of impact or a larger spread as the 5% would indicate. So again, we are consulting with Steele County Public Health. We have consulted with them all along the way. And as of this past Monday, when preparing this recommendation, Amy Karen, the Director of Public Health, gave us, as well as our colleagues in Medford, Blooming Prairie, and NRHEG, the green light to get started. I want to talk a little bit about the timeline and why it's important for us to wait until March 30th. First of all, there's many reasons, the first of which is it's a natural break in instruction for our students at quarter break. We have a spring break in there, which is March 22nd through 26th. The other piece is that in a district this size or larger, it takes time for us to do the things that are necessary to follow the mitigation strategies that are recommended, like finding spacing in our classrooms to make sure that we're doing our level best to do so. Furthermore, in the cafeteria, we have to find safe ways for our students to eat lunch, and it will look a bit different than it has. Because again, those are the conditions for our return. We have to look at staff availability again, and I mentioned that with vaccinations and how important those are to us for having the available staff to staff our classrooms. The other part is that with this waiting period, it allows families to transition as well. So if we think about the dates and what will be communicated to parents upon your approval this morning, is the week of March 15th is when we really start to make our shift. Monday, March 15th for our middle level high school and ALC will be a group 1 day, like we've been doing hybrid. Tuesday the 16th will be a group 2 day. Wednesday the 17th will be our distance learning day. Thursday the 18th is when we start to make the transition. So that will be a full transition day on Thursday, March 18th. There will be no instruction offered that day because our teachers will be starting to move things around in classrooms and getting themselves prepared. Spring break for us is from Friday, March 19th until Friday the 26th. And so those again will be the planned days that we've already had away from school. Then we come back from spring break on Monday, March 29th. That will be the second transition day. Those changes are needed really for us to, again, there's a different curriculum and a way we have to offer it now because what we've been doing is having 2 groups come in and the curriculum has shifted to accommodate that. Well, now that model is changing again where our teachers could have 35 kids in front of them again 4 days a week, and so we need to change things within scope and sequence. So again, those are the reasons why we're delaying. I would also add for you that we do contact our colleagues to try to learn from other districts and what they're doing. Most of the districts in the Big 9, with the exception of Mankato, are starting in that week of March 29th and 30th. And for the very same reasons that I illustrated for you this morning. So at this point, I believe I've given you all of the information and the recommendation as to what we're asking you to consider this morning. I would love to answer questions if you have them.
Okay, how is that going to work? Do we need to adhere to a 3 feet distance, and are there enough buses to get students to class?
So there are two settings that the Department of Health has allowed us to have a little bit more flexibility. One of them is a lunchroom and the other one is bus transportation or buses. In our letter to parents, because we've had to run a 50% capacity with buses, what we're sharing with parents is that we will no longer have that 50% capacity anymore, and we will have to have buses. And so all of our students and drivers obviously will be masked. Many of our routes in the community are 15 minutes or less, which is helpful because that's the rule about 6 feet, 15 minutes. But again, we just don't have enough transportation to do that. So that's one of the pieces that they gave us some flexibility with.
And will the parents be notified of some changing in bus numbers?
Yes. So in our communication with parents upon your approval this morning would be that bus routes are going to continue pretty much as they've been running them. There might be a few nuanced changes. If there are changes to any routing or anything for any of our secondary students, we've given the number of the bus companies and they'll be notified about that change. And furthermore, we recognize that some secondary students may not have been being transported yet, but now they would like to because of a work schedule at home or whatever the case might be. We're allowing those students to re-engage and become part of our routing again if need be. So the bus company, again, is a great partner with us, and they'll be navigating, which is just one more reason why giving us a couple of weeks here to do some planning around that is really helpful. Yeah.
I just want to take a minute, Jeff, to thank you for your leadership on this and your staff and the team. It's unbelievable. I imagine there's going to be a significant community exhale Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. when 6 through 12 is back. It's a step towards normalcy, what our kids need, what our community needs. So just thank you so very much. This is fantastic.
Thank you. I would add, and I want to echo this, we have a great staff in the school district.
Yeah.
And there has been really nobody looking at me. I mean, there's hesitation, right? Because this is another step, and it's one of those things where now we have all of our students back. But I would tell you that every one of our educators wants our students back in classrooms. And it's just going to take a little time to adjust to that and get things back to where we were. But again, I want to just make sure that staff get that credit as well for their excitement and also just passion and commitment to our students. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I have a couple questions, Jeff. And of course, obviously, this work is more than any of us can probably appreciate. So I would echo, what Jolene has to share. I must admit, I'm feeling impatient, though. I wish we could get there sooner. And I'm not, pointing fingers and holding any one person accountable. I guess a couple of questions to that point. Do you know how many? What is the status of teachers who have been vaccinated the first time? Are we kind of done with that phase, or?
As of next week, we'll have all of our staff that has been accepted a vaccine will have their first dose.
Yep.
Again, it goes back to the science around what the CDC is allowing for close contact. Staff availability, again, is probably the largest issue within this. And when we get to that date of the 30th, we'll have achieved second doses for, like I said, 95% of our staff, which is probably the biggest reason why we're delaying.
Yeah, because I must admit, I look at this and I'm like, yeah, but that's 4.5 weeks from now, and can we do it in 2, or could we, Well, spring break is in there, which is sort of fortunate, and maybe, I almost wish spring break started next week.
Yeah.
So that,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? You could, but.
Yeah, it still wouldn't alleviate the concern we have about staff availability. The other thing I would share with you is that our students have been in person and hybrid, and I want to make that clear. I mean, we've had students in hybrid. I recognize it's not 4 or 5 days a week, but they've been in person. There are some districts that haven't seen their kids in a classroom. Like I'll turn to our colleagues in Rochester. They have not had a secondary kid in their classroom since last March. And so this is a big shift for them. There are some districts that have gone earlier, but they got special consideration because of county numbers or whatever the case might be. And I'm not going to claim to know all of the rationale. But again, I feel like this cadence for us gives us enough time to be more planful versus hasty. I'd like to maybe take care of a lot of the mitigation before we get to that point versus sort of kind of drop it in and see what happens.
Yeah.
So
So just to kind of clarify, effectively, for students then, kind of their experience of spring break is essentially extended by 2 days, right? Because they're not going to have instruction on that Thursday, and they're not going to have instruction on Monday.
that's correct. Yep. And it's to allow staff, remember, those days at spring break are non-contract days for our teaching and support staff. Yeah.
Other thoughts, comments? Yeah, Nikki.
So with those 2 additional non-learning days, are we still within our parameters for number of days?
We are requesting some additional time from the Department of Ed, and that has been allowable all the way along. I know some districts have gone as far as taking 5 transition days during their transitions between models. Our staff, when we met with them, we started to kind of figure out what were the factors and how much time would be needed. And this includes some of our custodial staff as well, with moving furniture and putting things in classrooms. And so 2 days appeared to be the most reasonable timeline to do that.
But maybe just to clarify, if maybe I misunderstood your question, Nikki, do we have to add days at the end of the school
We
year?
do not.
We're still in a
No,
good
the
position.
Department of Ed has given us additional days to do that. We just reached our sort of limitation with the last one, and so we are requesting a couple of more days from the department, which they have graciously given to every district because the conditions change. So
Okay.
How about over here? Deborah? Eric?
I'm fine.
Questions? Thoughts?
This fear of spring break and so people don't run too wild like we had for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and just so they stay respectful when
Yep.
they do their things.
yeah, I would just add to that. I know there's been folks that have asked about, why wouldn't we take a little time, at least over a spring break, which would delay our in-person even further. I think it's an assumption that people are traveling over a spring break because of many different factors of why they might be here staying locally. However, it doesn't matter if they're going to Austin, Texas or Austin, Minnesota. We still need to be careful. We still need to follow the strategies that are in place because if our numbers tick up very quickly in Steele County again, we will shift back to distance learning. That's the way this goes. And so, again, it's my plea to our community that if we want to keep our students attending and keeping things in our windshield like prom and graduation, it's important that we do our job. And we continue as adults to be great role models for our children to let them know that these strategies are important for keeping us there, to stopping the spread.
Daniela?
Yes.
Student perspective?
I would like to say returning back to all 4 days would help students academically like a lot because just like those 2 days, I know that a lot of students like really struggle just to to stay on track, I guess, and just returning to those 4 days would just help to like be back to like the normal, I guess, and also just helping like with the teachers constantly being there every day for us and just helping us with anything that we're struggling with.
Thank you for that perspective, Daniela, because I know that our students, a good number of them, I know some of them are hesitant and some of them certainly kind of like the hybrid style because it maybe fits their lifestyle better or work or whatever the case might be. But we know, we are still convinced that the best learning that happens is when our students are in front of us. And returning to this way, I think, will offer those connections. I want to add one more piece I think that's important. We have no illusions that this will be much different because remember, we have not had students in our building for more than 2 days a week for a year. This is a big deal for us. So this shift in models is not just about flipping a switch and everyone's just going to come right back to where they were pre-COVID. There are going to be some trips and trials and along the way because re-engaging students in that schedule, re-engaging students in that learning, and even though learning has been remote and some kids have done wonderfully, other students have not. And so we've got some work in front of us. And but we know that this is best for our students, and quite honestly, we believe this is the best plan right now to do that.
Is there a date for parents of students that are presently in the hybrid and in person? Is there a date that you need to know by? For instance, if they're saying, I was okay with it the way it was, but I'm uncomfortable with it with students there 4 days with that many students, I'm going to switch to distance. Is there a date that they need to notify the district by so that you can make changes with regard to whatever staffing changes that might be necessary?
There hasn't been a date necessarily declared. However, what I would urge parents to know is that if they're considering that they should contact the high school to at least make them aware that they are looking to do that sooner than later. I think, well, I know this, Mr. Kath, Ms. Sullivan, and Mr. Shavers will be sending out letters specifically from their sites, which will provide parents those sorts of dates and things like that, because what the parents are receiving this morning is the 30,000-foot district view, and what they'll receive from their respective buildings is much more detail around the plan. Because like at the high school, I'll explain this, when they come back, we've got to take ACT tests, we've got MCA testing to get done. I don't like the notion of bringing students back in to do testing. But the Department of Education, United States Department of Education yesterday sent out a letter to say, we're still doing that. And so we will have to accommodate that as we bring them back. But that isn't the reason why. The reason why is we want our students back in buildings again.
Jeff, one more question. Do you know when will the building leaders be sending that additional detail? 'Cause parents
I would assume that will come early next week. At the
Okay,
latest.
But next week, so.
Yeah, I would say, and it could come as early as tomorrow. I don't know that we set a definitive date yet because they're still working out some details with staff. But I do think that we've got a timeline here that they'll turn that around rather quickly.
Nikki, did you have some?
Yeah, just, can you remind us again why a 4-day week and not a 5-day week?
Because we still have to serve about 500 distance learners that are in our middle school, high school, and ALC, the staffing for us does not allow us to have a separate set of second high school staff. Now, if the money trees around Owatonna for school districts were full, we might be able to accommodate that because we would actually have to go out and hire about 25 new secondary educators to do that. We just don't have that. We've been reducing our budget along the way. So within that, we have to accommodate the needs of our distance learners in a different way, meaning that Wednesday, we have to at least have one day where they can connect with distance learners, our teaching staff, I should say, are connecting with distance learners to make sure that they're still getting that connection and quality that we promised them around whether they've chosen to be in-person, hybrid, or distance learning.
Thank you.
You asking for board action?
I am. I'm asking for your consideration today, and the actual item I'm asking for you to consider is that you would approve this plan for the return of our secondary learners in ISD 761.
Okay. Any further comments, questions?
Well, yeah, as a parent of a junior, I've watched through this distance learning and hybrid learning model. I would say having the kids, giving them the opportunity, making this a reality is pretty important. If we can do it, and I think from what I've heard from Mr. Elstad, we can do it. Let's give them a chance to be in school 4 days so we can get that instruction the way, the best way we can.
Yep. There's no perfect answer.
No.
There's no bullseye with this. And there are people in our community that would be on one end of the spectrum that says, look at the numbers. We don't have a problem here in Steele County. Things are fine. There's a perspective that says, why are you waiting 4 weeks? Let's do it in 2. And there's another perspective out there that says, hang on.
Mm-hmm.
This is working. It's not the greatest, but it's working. I think what you're proposing is the means by which we can help the greatest number of students with the greatest outcome for their educational opportunities and mitigate the risk to the greatest extent possible. So with that, I'm going to make the motion that the board approve the recommendation of the administration regarding the return to classroom on March 29.
Second.
We have a motion and a second?
Well, I can second, but I'd want to amend your motion. It's March 30th.
The transition day is March 29th,
Yeah,
but the
thank you.
30th would be, thank you.
Yeah, if you'll all accept that amended motion to March 30th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor with an aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Need anything more from us?
I don't believe so. Thank you for your time this morning. And thanks for your thoughtful consideration.
This was tidy. Thank you all for coming in this morning. Much appreciated. We'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor with an aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, folks. Have a good day.
Do you need a pass for this